Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today's honored guest is Corey Dixon. Corey, what's going on with you, man?
Hey, what's up, Reggie, man? Good to see you, bro.
Good to see you too. It's been a year and a half, a little more than that since we moved down to the South Carolinas. So it's good to reconnect with my city, with my children's home city of Elgin, as they say, like we from Elgin.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
E-Town.
always good to get those ties back. So thanks for carving out a little bit of time to talk with us today. I just want to, start off and say I've already mentioned the workshop, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. So let's just go right from there. Corey, my first question for you to jump us off is, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
I never considered myself to be a genius, but I think after, knowing the work that you've been doing about the word and what that really means, now knowing my understanding, now having my understanding of what genius is, I do think I am in certain ways. And I think that we all have things about us that
Yes.
are really spectacular. So originally, no, I would never have thought of myself as a genius, but knowing your relationship to the word and your work with the word, I guess I am in ways.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the main reason why before you were like, nah, that's not me? Can you remember?
Yeah, I can specifically. It was related to academics. When you think of someone being a genius, you think of someone like a rocket scientist. You think of somebody who is some doctor of sorts, who's done something astonishing, right?
Mhm.
Somebody who, you know, um, does triple bypasses on the heart. Like you
Yeah, yeah.
think that it's somebody of such magnitude and skill that it's just like it's hard to find somebody that can get to that level. So you're like, man, that person's a genius. Like they have raised the bar and have raised it again. And so it was related to academics and just being a great student. And you got straight A's. It's just easy to you. You may skip high school and go straight to college.
Right,
That
right.
was my original, like, oh, I can't be a genius because I'm not that academic, so that was my first connection.
And that's the very thing that I'm trying to fight against. And I don't want to say fight, but I mean, let's say it for what it is, because it's too many people who are being alienated from their greatness because they can't self-affirm and say at the beginning of the day, outside of knowing my name, I know I have something to offer and contribute to the world. And that thing is of such a high quality that it's genius. It's specific to you. And so yeah, the main thing that I'm doing with this book and in this message of this workshop is to take away that academic definition. And it's not to say that the people who you just mentioned don't have genius. It's not to say that the person who it comes easy for, who skips a couple grades, who whatever, they have genius, but it's just one type of genius.
Right.
And so as long as we can understand that, hey, they have their lane, how about I discover what mine is and discover what I do that's on a genius level, then it's okay. But when we just narrowly define it, we're missing out on so much. And much of what we're missing out on is how we view and internalize who we are and what our ability to offer the world, to offer something to the world is.
Yeah.
So you talked about it perfectly. That's exactly how it was pitched to me. I can't say that I came up with this on my own. That's how genius is. Genius builds on top of what other people do and collaborates. And so the guy who led me to go down this path, his name is Bruce George. He came up with this brand called Genius is Common. And he was like, let's take this. He used the word elite. He was like, let's take away this elite narrative of this word and stop making it seem like it's only select people that have it. Because as long as there's select people that have it, the world is going to continue to be broken
Right. Right.
because everybody's looking around like, well, who can do something about this? I can't do anything about it. Well, where are the geniuses? And a lot of the time, the geniuses that the people who we attribute genius to, they're dead and gone.
Right. Right.
So it's like, what are we supposed to do now? We just supposed to wait for the next person? Like, no, you got to look within because yeah, we've been put on this planet. We are made in the image and likeness of God to do something to restore order and to restore wholeness to the planet. But we can't do that individually and corporately if we're not understanding and embracing that we have something to offer unique from anyone else.
Yeah. So, and on that subject too, like God has downloaded in each and every one of us some brand of genius, right? So we are uniquely made, in his image. And if we're uniquely made in his image, we got to be geniuses,
Gotta
because
be.
God is the genius of them all. He's the genius of the geniuses, right? So we have to have inherited a little of that. And he's told us too that we all have gifts, and we
Yes,
need to
yes,
use them towards the forwarding of his kingdom,
yes,
right?
sir.
So we all have that, right? So it's like, how have people, even Christians, all this time uh, thought in their mind that they're not a genius as they were taught, but still know the word and be in church
It's,
and say that, oh, I can't be a genius, when right there in the word, God is basically telling us that we are divine, right? That
yes,
we do have all of the similar qualities that he has. We're not perfect, but no person is except for him. And geniuses certainly are. So it just like goes together, right? So let me also tell you this too. Like when we're talking about genius, and originally it was the academic, right? The
yes,
elite, as you were saying. There was something that I discovered about myself at a young age, and I never thought about it as being the genius part of me, right?
okay.
So the genius part of me is my ability to connect with people, is
Hmm.
what I learned. I'm super empathetic. I have a certain level of emotional intelligence that just allows for me to relate to people, no matter their background, what they've been, where they've been, what they've done or haven't done. No matter what demographic category they fall in, I'm just genuinely interested in people. And it's like it's a genius, but I was calling it a superpower. I was calling it a superpower, right?
Yeah,
But and actually, like, that's in actuality, that is something that God has put in me,
yes.
to be able to relate and connect with people, people I never even met before. I talk to, and I can make them feel like we've known each other forever.
Hmm.
I can make them feel, and I feel like we've known each other forever. So I got tricking myself into it too, but it's just so natural, that and that is one of my geniuses, and I have others, but that is one of my main geniuses that I used to categorize as a superpower.
Superpower.
Yeah.
I like that you said it. It makes me think of a couple of things. One, it makes me, I was going to draw this comparison to, you remember The Incredibles, right? The first
Yeah.
movie. So in The Incredibles, the main villain Syndrome, his thing was, hey, look, I'm going to make everybody a super so that nobody's a super. He didn't want anybody to stand out anymore, right? Because he didn't
Yeah.
have a superpower like The Incredibles did. And that's very much what this movement is about. It's about, making that's why it's called genius is common. It's no longer like every other person or every 100th person has it. Everybody has it. Now let's go out and do something with it though. And so the other thing that it reminds me of, you called it a superpower. you know Self-affirmation is important, but there's a humility to it, and there's two aspects of humility that, and we often focus on the one aspect, which is don't think too highly of yourself. But true humility is not thinking too lowly of yourself either, because like you said, hey, look, if we're in the image of likeness of the OG of all this, the
Right.
original genius of all this, then
Right.
there's something that he's put on the inside of us that allows us to assert ourselves and say we have something that is special about us, right? And
Right.
so when you mention a superpower, it makes me think of, we're not to go around like Wile E. Coyote, like he used to put the card out like Wile E. Coyote, super genius. Like that's not the point of it. This is not to be a part of how you introduce yourself, but it
Right.
does help you. It's like putting on your cape for the day. Nobody else may see your cape, but you got to know, like when I go into a situation, I have something to offer that can improve my environment and leave it better than how I found it.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, man. And that is the right mindset to have. And I'm gonna tell you why, like how what you said directly relates to the genius that I was just talking about. So Most people don't know this, but I'm an introvert.
Me too,
Right?
actually.
You too? Okay.
Yep.
I'm an introvert, right? But I have to, because of my jobs, I have to be an extrovert at times. But I hit a switch, right? I hit a switch and I'm on, and nobody ever knows the wiser. Like, so when I go into these rooms with people, a lot of times, and I don't know anybody, I
Mm-hmm.
hit the switch and I start to get to know everyone, and I'm talking, I'm having these conversations, and then I turn it off, right?
Yeah.
When I'm done with those events and I go home and I retreat and I recharge, you know what I'm saying, until the next time that, that superpower is needed, until I need to activate that superpower. And, but in me doing that, I'm humbled in knowing like what my genius is, because I know that it was downloaded into me and it's for me to use properly in a way that is going to advance who I am and who God has made me to be. Right. And so you can have these, you see people all the time with these geniuses
Yep.
and they use them in the wrong way. Right. They don't use their genius in the way that they were called to use it. And they use it in a way that sometimes gets them into trouble, gets them, locked up, for example, even too. And they just use their skills to benefit the devil instead of to benefit the kingdom of God.
Yep.
And so you have to be careful with that genius, right? You have to be respectful of it. Because if you don't use it the right way, you'll find yourself in trouble. And if you don't use it at all, like, God is in the blessing building a business.
Yes.
He'll bless somebody else with those same geniuses, and they'll be at the forefront sharing those gifts that God has blessed them with. So
Man,
it's a really delicate balance there, because you don't want to miss out on these opportunities to give the world your genius.
you're making a lot of good points, man. I'm about to make you the host. I'm about to have you interview me. Just switch real quick, because what you're mentioning about how God is in the blessing business is a part of this has been given to me over the past probably 10 to 15 years in pieces, right? And those pieces manifest themselves in the components, the three components that we're going to discuss about genius. And those three components are passion, talent, and purpose. And so what you just mentioned makes me want to jump into talent real quick, and then
Yeah.
we'll come back to passion. But in the parable of the talents, God does exactly that. There were three servants that were given 5, 3, and 1 talent. So 5, 2, and 1 talent. And in the Bible, the talent wasn't about what gift you have that's good. It's about a measure of a precious metal, right?
Yeah.
And the one servant that had the least talent put it in the earth. And I used to talk to students about this all the time, metaphorically, like, do not put your talent in the earth, because God will not get a return on his investment that way. And when he comes back to look around and say, what have you done with my talent? And you're like, well, I put it in the earth. He was like, you didn't even put it in the usury, in the bank to get interest. He was like, and what he does, he's in the blessing business. He was like, take away the talent, the one talent from this servant, and give it to the one that did the most with his. And
Right.
that's exactly, and I for a long time, I was like, what does that look like in the life of an actual person when we're talking about our God-given talent? And it's about multiplying talent. So when we see what's on the inside of us and we spot it in somebody else, it's about nurturing that thing that we see in somebody else. You and I are introverts, but we know how to flip this switch. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will go into a circumstance and let the circumstance and let the situation push them around, instead of going in and standing and being like, no, I'm gonna turn this switch on, and then allow whatever's in me to come out, and to not, I mean, it's not about being, the only person in the room that can function, but it's about knowing where to fit in and how to get other people's functionality to come out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you had to do. If it's okay for me to bring this up, that's what you had to do in your first run for councilman. You
Yeah.
had to identify something in people and be like, you know what, you have this attribute, you have this attribute, you have this
Yeah.
attribute. I need this in my campaign to
Yeah.
help me get one of my attributes going, which is
Yeah.
about this networking that you mentioned, right? And that team of geniuses, we couldn't all have the same genius, because some things would have got missing, but
Right.
we complemented one another and performed a task that even you were telling me beforehand that people told you weren't going to be able to do.
Right. That's exactly true, man. And that even then, back then, those many years ago, I didn't recognize it as a genius, which actually is one of my other geniuses. So not only I consider one of my genius qualities as being someone who can relate and someone who is empathetic and can make friends and understand people and feel people, but one of my other geniuses is that I think I'm a good leader. I think I recognize qualities in people, like I did in that campaign. And I said, you know what, they'll be really good at this,
Yeah.
right? Not that this is not that they wouldn't be good at anything else, but this is their, their genius. I wasn't saying that back then, but
Right.
that's what it really was. It was identifying people that could work together cohesively to accomplish this ultimate goal that would, essentially, put me on a platform to where I could really activate my genius, right, and do what I was called to do. So like, you naming these different geniuses or recognizing these different geniuses within yourself, a lot of times these are geniuses that you've already recognized that, hey, I'm really good at something,
Yep.
right? But really you're a genius at it, right? I have all daughters. All of them are geniuses, right?
Yep.
All of them have something about them that is so unique that nobody else can do what they do, how they do, and how they approach whatever it is that they're doing. And so, like, to break down that stigma, like when
Yeah.
you started your genius work, I was telling my daughters, all of y'all, you all are geniuses, right? And it's like, huh? Because they already are hearing what the world is telling them what a genius is,
Hey,
not knowing that they're already a genius.
you know what the world does though? And this is, I hate to get into it, but it is what it is. For not only is the world defining genius in a way that excludes many of us, the world is also looking at our skin color, your
Mhm.
daughter's skin, our children's skin color, and telling them what they are. You're not a genius, but you're this though. And they're
Right,
called stereotypes.
right.
And stereotypes are manipulated. The stereotypes are manifested in the media, which surrounds so much of how we get information and what we see and what we hear. And if we're not careful, this is why genius is so important. When I start talking to middle schoolers or high schoolers, because I'm like, once you self-affirm that you have this high quality, this high functioning quality on the inside of you, you won't take when somebody puts a lesser label on you. You'll be like, no, at the very least, I'm a genius. So when you say, or when you tell me that all I can do is be this because of my environment that I came up in, or all I can do is, all I can do is something in sports or entertainment, it's like, no, I don't have, there are limitations, but you don't accept the limitations that somebody else puts on you because it makes their world make sense.
Man, absolutely. And I'm gonna tell you, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for God. And this is why. Because I knew who he was, when people told me what they thought about me, I knew to know that it wasn't true.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is because I knew him and he had instilled a confidence in me that was going to be unbreakable no matter what somebody said. So no matter how people would label me, no matter what words some people would throw at me, I knew who I was because I knew him, right?
Yes,
so when I have these geniuses, they're unbreakable because I understand where they came from and how they're supposed to be used. You see what I'm saying?
yes, sir.
So all of these conversations that you have with people, and they're not, maybe not using their geniuses or recognizing their geniuses, or they're letting their geniuses go to waste. A lot of that to me is just based off of they don't have, they need to have a stronger relationship with God if they don't already have one.
Yep.
If they have one, and if they don't have one, they need to get one, because once you get one, can't nobody tell you who you are. You know
Right.
who you are in the kingdom, and he puts you on such a high pedestal, right? I ain't like nobody else, right? That doesn't mean I'm better than anybody else, and that
Right.
don't mean that anybody else is better than me. But God puts you on such a high pedestal as a child of God that it doesn't matter what people say, what people do, and what they think of you. You know, He's going to always maintain you, and He's going to make a footstool out of those enemies or those people who oppose you just
Hey,
because you His.
yeah, that pedestal that you're on is because he's put the enemies of the world as his footstool, and he sets you on top of that.
That's
And
right.
that's, the important work for you once you realize where you are is to help lift other people up, because the God's children are everywhere,
Right.
right?
Right.
And to know who you are and to see somebody else who doesn't know who you are, it kind of breaks your heart. And that's how God works, though. Like there's so much of what we see in the world that breaks our heart because it breaks his heart. And that's getting into the passion. But I want to go back to a phrase that you said earlier. I like that you said God is the genius of geniuses, and it makes me think of he is King of Kings and
Right.
Lord of Lords. I remember the first time I realized that he wasn't that those phrases that describe who Jesus Christ is. Those kings and lords are always thought of as actual monarchs over countries and things like that. But now I understand it's us, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like those king of kings and little kings and little lords is us. He is the genius of geniuses. That's us,
Mhm.
right? And again, it's not about this arrogance. It's not about trying to lift yourself up higher. It's just that, for many of us, for many minority men specifically, the world has done such an effective job of pushing us down that we don't know the level that we should be at.
Mhm.
And so it's our job when we see others, like, look, let me show you who you are. Because a lot of times if the connection is broken, that they don't know who their father is and who they are in their father, it's up to us to say, like, no, let me tell you who you are, though.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's a lot of what this workshop is about, this interview. So you said so much and we haven't even I gotta get back on script because I love it. Um,
Okay. Okay.
let me back up. I have a quote that I typically read to people that helps set the stage for what we've already been talking about.
Okay.
This quote actually comes after I ask my second question. And that question is, like, who do you think comes to most people's minds when they hear this word genius?
Who do I think comes to most people's mind?
Who comes to your mind? Like when you were in this
You know
stage
me,
where you were like, I'm not a genius. You had somebody in your mind who you thought was a genius, though. When you hear that word genius, whose face comes into your mind?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
That's
Okay.
the first person face that comes to mind. Um, because for me as a black man, to see that man do what he did in becoming president
Sure.
was genius to me
Yeah.
because he knew exactly what to do, when to do it, what moves to make, what moves not to make, that ultimately propelled him to the point of being the most powerful man in the world.
What team they have around him? Like
The
who
team
had?
have around him, yeah, all of that kind of stuff. Like he just knew, and so that's what comes to mind with to me, right? And I
Mhm.
think prior to him, it probably would have been Einstein,
Yep.
because that's who the
That's
world
that's the
and
bar.
that right, and he is a genius. I'm not saying that he isn't, but that was something that was implanted in me versus something that I knew on my own
Yeah.
automatically.
That you put together on your own, like just like I was telling you about media, it we get so much messaging and information without really learning it. And
Yeah,
that imprint that is on everybody's mind. That's the number one answer is
yeah,
Einstein. And I'm not taking anything away from him. He was a genius.
right,
But what has been done is people associate genius to Einstein and then automatically disassociate it from themselves because they're like, I don't know nothing about the theory of relativity. I
right,
can't tell you what E equals MC squared is about. And so because he has this, I must not have it. And that's flawed thinking. And
right.
the quote that I mentioned purportedly comes from Einstein. There's some evidence now that says that it's not, because again, the interwebs, you can't trust them.
Yeah,
When you get this information. But it was fitting when I first came across this quote that it was attributed to Einstein because it helped me deconstruct this word genius. So are you ready for this quote? You gotta let me know if you've heard it before
okay.
and how you internalize it, how it hits you, or how it hit you the first time you heard it. So you ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Here it goes. It goes, If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Okay. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree,
Uh-huh.
it'll spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you heard that before?
I have not heard that before.
How's that hitting you right now?
Uh, it's deep. It makes me think of, in general, it makes me think about you being a person being in a lane doing something for whatever reason. Maybe they felt like they were relegated to doing this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they are going against the grain and they want to do this one thing and they're not great at it, or probably not even good at it, and they may just be getting by, or maybe they're just absolutely terrible at it.
Right.
Which makes me think of somebody like a Michael Jordan playing baseball. It was like, you weren't supposed to be playing baseball.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I know you loved it, but you weren't supposed to be playing it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it makes me think of. A person doing a thing that is not their calling.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's supposed to invoke.
That's not their genius. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've added something to this that I haven't thought of before. Most of the time when I think of this fish trying to climb this tree, in my mind, I envision somebody coming by daily and telling this fish, you're supposed to climb a tree. You're supposed to climb a tree,
Yeah.
and ignoring the makeup of the fish, the design of the fish. Mm-hmm. But you said something that's different. You said maybe this fish has, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Maybe this fish has convinced itself that it's supposed to be doing this. Right. And sometimes we find ourselves in those situations, right? I remember this quote that said, never become good at, like, the worst thing you can do is to become good at something that you weren't meant to do.
Right. Right.
But in this case, the fish is not getting good at it because a fish doesn't have the equipment to climb a tree. A fish was designed for water.
Yeah.
It's streamlined. It has scales. It has gills. God designed this fish to be in its element of water. And so if you continually have this fish trying to climb this tree, what's going to happen if the fish stays out of the tree long enough, Corey?
If it stays out of the water long enough?
Water, sorry, I said tree. If it stays out of the water long enough, what's going to happen? It's going to die. Yeah. And so that's where I am now, where I see people's genius not in their right element, and it's dying. And I feel like it's my responsibility to resuscitate, revitalize, and resurrect the genius that's around me. Because I'm tired of when I think of this fish trying to climb this tree, I think of somebody beating their head up against a brick wall and trying to figure out why things aren't working for them in their life. It's because you've already used the word, you haven't found the right lane. Once you find your lane, once you find your element, like if somebody would have just come along and put this fish in the water, you would see right away what its genius is. It would take off and you wouldn't even be able to keep up with it. It would be gone. Right. And so that's what this genius is about, is finding your element, finding your lane so that you can function the way you're supposed to. And in that functionality, in that high functionality, that's where these components come into place. It's passion, talent, and purpose, because they help you figure out what your lane is. Yes. So I'll pause for a second and see, did you have any points to make to that?
Yeah, man. Yeah. And let's clear up something. I don't want people to think, after hearing you and I have this conversation, that you aren't going to struggle sometimes.
You're going to struggle.
Right? You're going to struggle, right? Like anything worth having, there's going to be some struggle to it.
Yes.
So tell me if I'm wrong, but right now you're not saying that there won't be struggle. There won't be any struggle. You're not saying that there won't be some days won't be really difficult in your path, in your lane of what you're called to do. Those things are absolutely a part of it, because even as Christians, God didn't tell us that we won't have weary days.
Right.
He didn't tell us that we weren't going to have bad days. He didn't tell us that there were going to be some absolutely horrible days and some horrible times. He just said, whatever you go through, I'll always be with you. I'll never forsake you. He gave you a sense of comfort, right? And that's similar, boy, thank you, God. That's similar to when you are figuring out, not figuring out, but once you're in your lane, it translates over. Because when you're in your lane and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to have these difficulties. But if you know deep down in your heart, and we all know it too, right? The same way, like when I met my wife, I knew I was going to marry her. Right, once a one other day, like you just know that deep down inside. So if you know that, you know, like that this is what you're supposed to be doing, not that that's just what you want to do because of your flesh wants you to do that,
Right.
but because your spirit is telling you this is where you're supposed to be, and you're going to have some struggles even in that journey. So
But you won't be derailed by it because you're like, it resonates in your spirit. Like, I don't care how many times I feel like this. I don't care. You know what? This is part of it. You are in the sauce, or
yeah.
you are in the spirit, because what I share is that there's an acronym for fail. And that
Mhm.
acronym is first attempt in learning. And
Yeah,
so it's not a fail as long as you learn
love that.
from the obstacles of, hey, because the three pieces that we're going to talk about, it's like putting a puzzle together.
Mhm.
And you're not going to get the puzzle off the top. You're going to have to like look at it and turn the orientation of the pieces and try and figure out, because putting passion, talent, and purpose together it sounds easy, but it's not. And so you're not going to, I tell students all the time, you're not going to get this right. Don't give up when it doesn't work the first time. Learn
Right.
from the misstep and miscue and just go at it again. The struggle could be just even convincing yourself that, hey, I got to stop doing this and over here and come over here and switch. That can be hard because we form habits as people, and it's hard to break habits to try and do something new that's going to put us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. And listen, and if you're somebody listening to this and you have a genius, maybe that you might have let go 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and you haven't been using your genius, and you've been going down this other path. That genius was given to you at birth. You still have that genius, right? So when you go back and you start trying to tap into that genius, you're probably going to get some pushback on some things going forward in that, because God gave you that genius. You didn't use it. So sometimes, but you got to like almost like reprove yourself and be like, this is what I want to do. Like I will do right by this genius, by this gift, by this blessing. So, so I may be talking to somebody out there listening to this, like, you know what? I can re-engage and be reinvigorated by my geniuses, by my blessings that feed my geniuses. I just got to get doing the work necessary. It ain't gonna be easy.
Yep.
Right? It don't mean that it's not gonna be hard, but I'm committed to it, and my spirit says so. So I just want to give
Tap
that
into
to
that.
people.
I appreciate that, because when you tap into that, the Lord is a redeemer of time.
That's right.
Right. When you come into it, he's like, okay, you remember now. All right, let's
Mhm.
get back to it. Right. He'll restore what was taken from you. I mean, I have, as a publisher, I helped, I'm reaching out to, first I used to focus on youth and trying to get them to release books, right? But
Mhm.
now I'm having older people in their 60s and 50s that are coming to me like, hey, I've had this idea for a book. And I'm like, let's get it done.
Mhm.
Right. Like I manifested my genius in publishing my books and then my children's books, but now it's become a thing where that's my lane to help other people. It's not, because I've said this from jump. Whenever you
Yeah.
talk to me about the books, I was like, it's never been about me. It's been about being an inspiration to somebody else to say, you can do this too, though.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that much different from you. And if you feel like you can't do it, I can come alongside you and help you get
Right.
this book out, right? So, and that's how genius works. Once it works on you, then it turns around and says, who else can I help that has the same talent or the same skill set as me, or is trying to develop that skill set?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You help magnify other people's gifts, other people's geniuses, and that in turn, reciprocally, it also feeds into your genius. And you don't do it because it feeds into your genius, but you do
Yeah,
it because your genius demands that you share that with the world.
absolutely. Man, this is good. So
Yeah.
look, one of the things that I want to mention, because we have this open forum to discuss this fully, is what the world calls genius, the Bible calls the mind of Christ. So we already established one way to connect your genius back to God because you are his child and he is a genius. But even now we can talk about it from a perspective of if a born again believer is a part of the body of Christ, and Christ is the head of the body or the head of the church, then when that scripture, 1 Corinthians 2:16 says you have the mind of Christ, is letting you know that you as a part of the many member body have access to how he thinks, right? And so when you come into this knowledge that you have something precious, you might say, well, I don't know how to work with this. I don't know what the next step is. I see this obstacle that I keep stumbling over and I don't know how to get around it. Now you can say, Lord, like, give me what I need, give me the wisdom, give me the knowledge, which are gifts of the Holy Spirit, to know how to maneuver and to navigate through this system or through these systems that I'm put in with my genius. And so even as every part of the body communicates with the brain so that we can walk and function and do all the many different things that the body can do, it's the same way. Like my pinky finger is communicating with my mind right now. So when I touch this table, it knows how to position itself and it knows how to make me stable, right? And so that communication means that part of my body has access to that part of my brain, and there's a part of my brain that's uniquely designed or uniquely set aside to help that particular part of my body function. And so as we are parts of the body of Christ and we communicate with Christ in his thinking, that is how we're tapping into what the world calls genius.
That's good. That's good. And so, and that makes me think of another element, right? So Christ-like mind, but also we're after God's own heart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So just like the brain is connected in a way that you were talking about, the heart is also connected and is a part of that whole equation too. So we're after God's own heart with this Christ-like mind.
Yes.
Right. So it's just a connection, a linear connection be just between the two. And like for me, it makes me think about what you were actually previously talking about when you're talking about people realizing what their geniuses are and praying about those geniuses in a way that is going to help them navigate, accentuate, and figure out how to move when they're in the path of using their geniuses. And so you can have that Christ-like mind, and that is your genius, but you're also a child after God's own heart too as well. And so to me, as you're just talking, I'm just connecting the dots on all of that. So this is really good.
You don't even understand how well you're connecting the dots, man. You just alley-oop me, man. And you are in it, because when we start talking about this first component of passion is all about the heart.
Yeah.
And it's just as we have God-given talent. I'm gonna deconstruct this word passion, just like I did with genius, and help people see exactly what you just said.
Okay.
Being a man after God's own heart, or a woman after God's own heart. So when I bring up this word passion, Corey, what comes to mind? You're a great guest, by the way. I gotta say that.
Okay.
You are one of my best guests I can say thus far, and we're not even finished, because you just, like I said, you just giving me the lob, and all I gotta do is dunk it.
Yeah.
So what comes to mind when you hear this word passion? What words come to mind?
Oh, first words that come to mind when I hear the word passion is trying, strength. And I mean trying as in it's trying on you. Like it's almost a will, a determination, a pounding of sort, sometimes even. It is a deep down desire.
Yeah.
That's unshakable. It's like a rock, a boulder. Those are some of the first words or descriptions that I think of when I think of passion.
Okay. I had one guest say that it's like the fuel in your tank.
Okay.
And it propels you forward, right? And this
Yeah.
gets back to these obstacles that you're surely going to encounter, whether they be systems, people, because going back to this fish, this system of this tree, and somebody telling him that this fish has to climb this tree, is a system. And when we encounter these systems, and the people that have derived these systems for their benefit and not our own, we have to be passionate enough and driven enough to be like, yeah, this is telling me I don't belong, but I'm about to storm through it anyways. And so it's very much, you use the phrase, that's why I say you all in the spirit. You use the phrase, a man after God's own heart. And when you tap into your passion, it's very much like David and Goliath. When you meet your Goliath, and you're going to meet him, you're not going to cower away like all of the other camp did. You're going to be like David and be like, who is this uncircumcised dog talking to? Yo, give me something. I'm about to take this joker all the way out. Like, he was the only one that had the right response. And why he was, one of the reasons why he was said to have a man after God's own heart, is because he didn't let something that was bigger than him, something that was an obstacle to him, hold him back from what he knew. Like, no, this is not how this is supposed to happen, though.
Right. Which takes me to another point.
Okay.
How dare anybody try to impede upon my genius?
Yep.
How do you have the audacity to try to take away my genius, or to try to belittle my genius, right? But people do it every day.
We do it every day, to ourselves and to other people.
To ourselves and to other people. Kids have it happen to them right away. As soon as they get to school, who do we start hearing about? Bullies. Bullies trying to take away your genius, right? So that happens, right? When you're an adult and you're in the workplace, what happens? They may not be bullies necessarily, but there may be other people around you in your team even, or just in other departments, but they try to belittle your genius to accentuate themselves, what they think is so genius about themselves, right?
Yep.
So but go ahead, man. I just wanted to drop that in there a little bit.
You're already setting it up. You're doing it again. I'm gonna let you know in about 5 minutes when I give this real life example about what this looks like. You're setting it up again. I love it. Okay. So the thing that I have to make sure to mention, though, because you get me excited. I got to make sure I remember the script. All right.
Okay.
So passion, most people will think about love when they think about passion, but as it relates to your genius, I actually encourage people to focus on the exact opposite end of the spectrum of love, and that's hate. Check it out.
Okay.
The reason why I say focus on what you hate, and once again, I can't take credit for this on my own. I read a book by this gentleman called Mike Murdoch, and the book was called The Assignment. And in this book, he says, if you want to figure out what your assignment is, figure out what your Popeye moment is. And I believe you're in my generation enough to remember Popeye the cartoon, this sailor who he would go against a circumstance that would be against him, and most of the time it involved a bully Bluto. And he would get to this place where he would say, I've had all I can stand. I can't stand no more. He would pull out that spinach, and then whatever circumstance was on top of him, he would flip it and be on top of it. He was like, find your Popeye moment. What is the thing that you can't stand that's around you that you keep focusing on? And so that's the thing that you hate. And so this is still tapping into God's heart, being a man after God's own heart, because we talked at the beginning of this interview about the brokenness of the world, and that when God looked out and saw the broken, fallen state of the world, what did he do? His solution was to make somebody in his image and likeness that had authority and that had power that could bring order back to the world. And so when God looks out on the world and he sees its brokenness, he sees the wickedness of sin that is in, he's like, that breaks his heart. And when it breaks his heart, he begins to say, hey, look, I'm gonna touch your heart with a little bit of what breaks my heart. I'm gonna make you hate what I hate. And we are not talking about people. We are talking about things that are wicked, things that are sinful in the world. When he sees that and he breaks our heart the way it breaks his heart, you'll start saying things like, you'll see something that affects you. And it was something that was probably trying to take you out at a young age, like bullying, right? Yeah. You'll see it affecting you, and it'll leave an imprint on you. And you'll be like, oh, I can't stand when I see that. I can't stand how that made me feel when it happened to me. And so when you see it operating as you get older, you'll be like, somebody should do something about that. Yeah. I hate it. Yeah. And when you keep focusing on the same thing, like when you get around your friends and they're like, don't let Corey see that because he's gonna go off. He's gonna go off. Don't let him see that. Yeah. Like, they know you're gonna start talking, right? When you keep saying somebody should do something about that. That somebody is actually you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of times we'll get worked up, like, that don't bother you. You ever been in a situation like that don't
Oh,
bother you?
yeah.
And you're like, nah, it really doesn't.
Man,
It's like,
I see people all the time. Like, it may just be at work, right? So at
mhm,
work, I'm a director at the local sheriff's office here in Illinois, Kane County Sheriff's Office, and then I also have my other role, you know, my city role and things of that nature. So I'm around teams all the time, and we're always collaborating and thinking about what we can do next and all this kind of stuff. And people will come up with ideas,
yeah,
right? When they come up with ideas, I'm like, that is great. What do you need for me to do to help support you, you know, complete that idea, right? Because the guy didn't give me the idea, you know,
right.
a lot of these ideas, he gave it to somebody else, like, all right, cool. So what do we need to do to get that done? You tell us what you need, because I want you to walk in what God has downloaded into you, because
Yep.
I know it's going to be successful, right? I can't give you the idea, right? I'm gonna tell you one thing my wife says, right? My beautiful wife, Janelle, one thing that she told me like early on when I got into politics. I really call it community service, but for
Okay.
the sake of the conversation, people know we're talking about politics, right?
Mhm.
Um, I was walking in my lane in my purpose, and I think that to some people it looked easy to be able to do it.
Sure.
Um, but it wasn't easy. It was a lot of hard work, and it was years of preparation before I ever said I'm in, right? But one thing, and once I got in, like people were trying to not emulate, but it was emulating, you know, certain aspects of it. And I never got mad at it. It was like, you know, it's a form of flattery in a way, right? But my wife said to me, she said, Corey, she was like, everybody is trying, well, some people are trying to get that secret sauce, but you just have to remember that you are the secret sauce, right? Like it does, some things don't work because of who the person is. That's not
Yeah.
what they were, essentially what she was saying was like, that's not what they were called to do.
Right.
Right. So when you're trying to be somebody else, if you're trying to act like
Mhm.
behave like someone else instead of being who you were called to be, it doesn't work. You know what I'm saying?
You know
So
what it is, right?
what is that?
That's being a fish out of water.
That's being a fish out of water. Exactly. That's been you that fish trying to climb the tree, right? When you need to get in the water and do and be whatever that and do whatever that water is for you, you know, but people trying to do something else because somebody else do it. And we get a lot of that too because of social media.
Sure.
You know
Sure.
what I mean? So much of that all the time now. But when you truly know what your calling is, when you truly know where you're supposed to be, going back to what I said, you feel that in your spirit
Yes, sir.
and you go.
And sometimes you do got to be prompted though, because here's my real life example. And you, like I said, you already kind of brought this up. This is how practically this works, but this is how transforming it is. So keeping in mind that the thing that you hate is the thing that you were meant to fix on this planet, and that's part of your passion, which
Yeah.
is a part of your lane, which is a part of your element that you're supposed to thrive in. I went to a elementary school in the Elgin area about a couple of years ago. I was asked to come in by the principal and talk to 10 little boys. They were all minority kids,
Mm.
but they were in the third, fourth, and fifth grade. All of them were in the same class all day. Third, fourth, and fifth graders. So that already tells you something is off.
Yeah.
They were on IEPs, individual education
Yeah.
plan, which we would have called special ed back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you already know they're being told to climb a tree and they're all fish. And because they can't climb it, they've been alienated and marginalized into this one classroom. They in one classroom all day. So I was like, I'm gonna talk to them about genius. I was workshopping this idea. And so I came in like, hey, I need y'all to know something. You're a genius. And they looked at me like, this guy, like, I don't think you
Yeah.
know who you're talking to. Like
Yeah.
they did not receive it at all. They were upset, that they were even offended that I came in with these positive affirmations, because they were used to negative affirmations. Hey, you're ADD, you're
Right.
ADHD, you have a learning disability, you have emotional imbalances, you have this, you have that. They
Mm-hmm.
were more comfortable, because right after I called them genius, they started roasting one another. And they were
Yeah.
more comfortable roasting one another, affirming themselves negatively, than they were with my positive affirmation. But I had something for them. So I was like, all
Yeah.
right, I know how to get you to react. And this is why I use this word hate so much, because when I talk to children, kids, all the kids can tell you what they hate, right? So I'm like, all right, why don't y'all tell me what you hate? And it was like, hey, you ain't saying nothing but a word. Give me the
Right.
space and opportunity. And so though these 10 little boys could never agree on anything, what to play, when to play, all of them universally said the same thing. They identified the system that was putting this tree in front of them and making them feel stupid because they couldn't climb it. They all universally told me, we hate school, Mr. Key. And I said, let's talk about it. And,
Yeah.
and the teacher's in the background, like, oh my gosh, why are you letting them say this? And I'm like, just bear with me. She's sweating, right? I'm like, listen, you telling me you hate school. I'm telling you the thing that you hate is the thing that you were meant to fix in this world. So when you tell me that you all hate school, you're telling me that you eat your future educators.
Mm.
And they was like, I said, oh no, don't back away. Why are you getting quiet? I said, let me further explain this to you.
Right.
I said, look, there are 8 different learning styles that we've identified. At most, schools only teach from 3.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't speak one of these 3 languages, which is a verbal learning style, I'm putting in my ears, a verbal learning style, auditory learning style, or visual, auditory and verbal are the same. So that's one learning style. Visual, or if you're a left brain logical thinker, that means, you're good at math. Yeah. I'm like, if you're not one of those 3, when you receive this information in school, it's going to literally sound like another language. Yeah. And you're going to be like, I don't even feel like I fit. I hate this place.
Yeah.
Everything that you're supposed to absorb and internalize and then put back on a piece of paper is coming at you in a language that you don't speak. And so I said, you're probably a kinesthetic learner, which means you gotta move around to get the information. But then when you start moving around, they tell you to sit down. Or you may be expeditionary or exploratory, meaning you got to work with your hands, but then you're told to keep your hands to yourself. Or you may be a right brain thinker and everything is coming at you from a left brain thinker. And so you now don't fit in. And you're now being told that you don't belong because you're all in this class all day. No wonder you hate the school system. The school system is broken. It's a reflection of the world. But what I told them was, if you, instead of running away from the thing that you hate, if you now run towards it, think about David and Goliath. If you now run towards this thing that you hate and use the thing that alienated you, your learning style, to become a teacher and make your learning style your teaching style, you're going to start to reach other people who have the same learning style as you that are feeling just as alienated. And now you're going to make them feel like they belong. Now you're going to help them thrive. And if we get more teachers who are aware of their learning style and the learning style of others that are going in teaching in this way, you're going to start fixing the school system. You're part of the solution now instead of being part of the problem.
Yeah.
That's game changing.
Yeah. And when you said that to them, like you were saying, they probably were looking at you like you crazy. But then when you broke it down to them, they're like, okay, so I get to teach somebody that may be a learner like me and teach them this same material in a way that makes them understand.
Yeah.
That's not that bad. I give more, that's freedom to me, right? That's me correcting the wrongs, right? Because I see what the issue is with these current styles of teachings. So right.
You know what I'm saying? By not having it. And so they can empathize now when they see it acting as somebody else, like, the buck stops here. That's not going to happen under my watch anymore.
Right. And you give people like that time in different ways, in different industries or whatever, jobs or whatever, who recognize that, and they're just a different kind of person in charge, a different kind of leader, because of that, those experiences, professionally or even growing up. So that's really a beautiful thing, but that point that you were making about you recognizing what's wrong and what you hate, and the way that you explain that is genius, right? Because I hear kids all the time say, I hate school, right? I hate math. They may not say school because they like to socialize. That basically, I hate math, I hate science, I hate English. Well, you hate these things not because you can't be good at them, but because of the way they've been taught to you is not your learning style, And now you can learn it in your style, and maybe you can teach the subject, going forward in the future. But I got to tell you, man, it's sometimes, to be honest with you, I recognize things that are wrong, right? And I
Mhm.
think that all of us, I think all of us naturally recognize when something is wrong, because you just made uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
You see something that makes you uncomfortable. You are in the presence of maybe some things that are going on that makes you uncomfortable. So you're born to recognize what's wrong. It's almost like a survival, mechanism.
Yeah, yeah.
And but what I've done with recognizing what's wrong, since I already know why I'm recognizing what's wrong, because these things are unique to me
Mhm.
and in my roles in the community, when I recognize something that's wrong, I'm in charge now, right? Now that I know what's wrong, now I need to be doing the work to correct it,
Yeah.
right? To help make that adjustment. That doesn't mean blow up a system. That doesn't mean to obliterate what's already there. But since I notice that there's something that's lacking, and I care about this thing, but I hate the way that it is, I got to do something about it. And
Yes,
so
sir.
now today, I'm on 10 different boards. I got 2 jobs, I got all these other activities, extracurricular things that I'm involved in and that I do, because I recognize that some things were wrong, some things might have been lacking. And now I add myself to these things because my genius tells me that I should. So it's almost like, if you really tap in and lean into it, you'll be doing these things all day, every day, and it doesn't feel like work, but it can consume you
It
to so
can.
much, to the point where
Hmm.
you're doing this 24/7 every chance that you get. And it's beautiful, and it's also and it can also be
It's a blessing and a curse.
it can feel like a burden at some points in times, right? Because you're still human. No
Yeah.
matter what, you're still human.
And the brokenness of the world will make you feel like, because if you're a person who focuses on systems and how systems don't work, because I mean, you already said it. The example that I gave talked about the school system and its brokenness, but there are systems that are broken across all industries. Any place where there's human beings involved, there's going to be some brokenness and something that's not operating as it should. And so the thing about it is, yeah, you'll be driven to run towards it, but you also have to know what you can't start off trying to do a dozen things at once. You got to be like, okay, what's my lane here, and how can I get excel at that, and then begin to expand out, or begin to identify and encourage other people. Because a part of being a leader too is to delegate and be like, you know what though, like, you go do that because I see your skill set. I
Mhm.
see your skill set. Let's identify how that skill set can fit into here, and then send you. I'm gonna say
Mhm.
this to you right now because you brought it up. But I feel like we're back on that train all those many years ago when you were talking to me, and we were having it was a similar conversation, but not because we weren't talking about genius, but
Yeah,
you were telling me all these different things that you were doing. And remember what I said? Like, you got all these different hats, and
right.
you may have to start taking some hats off to focus in on what
Yeah,
it is that's the task at hand.
right.
Because the passion, I almost, you're even getting into some other books that I want to write that are sequels to this Common Genius, because one of the and that focus on the individual sections, because there is such a thing as being overdriven in passion.
Yeah.
And one of the examples that I have is Tupac.
Mm.
Tupac uh, died unnecessarily because, well, a couple of different reasons. He died, one, because he didn't know what his identity was. He got lost in who he was.
Mhm.
And genius is very much about not getting lost in who you are.
Mm.
He got lost in who he was because he was overcome by the passion for his people.
Mhm.
He created this whole movement called Thug Life, and he was not a thug.
Yeah. Yeah.
He went to school. He was a trained. He knew ballet. He was a poet. He was all these different things because he had all these talents, and he tried to make the talent go in these directions. But he morphed himself and said, look, okay, my people are being abused. I'm going to stand up for them. But he stood up in a way that didn't identify with who he was.
Mm.
So I'll say, I never get into this with these one-on-ones, but I feel like it's relevant. I feel like when I look at Tupac's life, I know that at one point, a lot of people don't know he's from Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah.
And then he moved to the West Coast. And when he was trying to establish his career and he moved to the West Coast, there came a time when he got pulled over by the police and brutalized by them for no reason. And he said, okay, you want to treat me like a thug, I'm going to act like a thug. And his identity began to slip. And so he was driven by this trauma, by this passion to address this thug life that is put on his people. But then that passion overtook him and caused him to embrace something that he was never meant to embrace. And he started acting like a thug and got taken out like a thug, even though that's not the life that he really had. Yes, he was an activist, but he was not in the streets. And so that caused him, to me, to lose his life prematurely before his time. And if we let the passion drive us like that, it can burn us out and make us get into something that we weren't supposed to get into if that passion gets uncontrolled.
Right, right. And now that you mention it, this does very much feel like that conversation that we had on that train so many years ago. And it is not a coincidence as to when those conversations took place. No, it's not a coincidence. So speaking with you right now is therapeutic, because it's reminding me of some things that you even had said to me back then, right? And it's speaking to what you said back then is speaking to me now. And then what I just explained to you before you even mentioned that and brought that up is some of the same things I had said to you then. And then you went on to say, like, focus in on, and do these things. So I really, really appreciate being able to have this conversation and to be interviewed by you. And I just want to tell you that you're a genius.
Hey man, salute. Appreciate it.
All right. You're a genius. And what you're doing right now with breaking down the stigma of what genius is, you are empowering people to reach their full potential. You're unleashing them. You're taking the chains off of them because they no longer can have any excuse about who they are, right? They no longer can say that I don't fit in this box. I don't do X, Y, or Z. So I must not be important to this world. I must not be important to these people. I must not be important to these systems because I don't fit the mold that they want me to fit.
Right.
But what you're doing is shattering all of that.
Yes, sir.
And you're saying, no, that we all are geniuses. We all have some things about us that are unique, that we can do, that will propel us to the point that really that God wants us to go to and to be in that lane, if we just truly believe that we're the genius that he made us to be.
Yeah.
And so just the overall thinking of doing that is genius, because you're making geniuses people who already were geniuses, but you're helping them realize they're genius. So you're making geniuses as you're talking, as you're ripping down these stereotypes. So it's just all great, man. So congratulations to you and the family. It's just wonderful. I said something to you that always stick with me. I said something to you that sticks with me.
Okay.
I remember telling you one day, and I believe it might have been at your children's book signing. Okay. And I said to you, and you tell me if you remember this, and I'm paraphrasing, but I said something to you along the lines of, what you're doing right now with your kids is going to multiply to the point where they are going to be so different and so much better off because of the father that you are to them.
I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And
that, Reggie, is a part of your genius to say, you know what? I'm supposed to be this kind of father, right? I'm supposed to be this kind of husband. and you tapped into those geniuses that when I was looking at, and I'm watching your kids who are, I don't know, at the time, 7, 8, 9 years old,
Yeah.
and they're writing books and they're publishing these books, and these brown kids are sharing their books with these other brown kids that look just like them, and they're impacting them, and they're like, I could write a book, like somebody just like me can write a book. It just compounds itself as far as the impact is concerned. And so you've tapped into so many geniuses just in your genius of being able to write and to be able to provide people information through doing so. You've tapped into and unleashed a whole other sets of geniuses that informs other people about their genius.
Man, that's the goal. I have a vision of an army of authors
Mm,
and it's just multiplied, because that's what we're supposed to do: be fruitful,
yeah,
multiply, and replenish.
right.
Right. So I mean, you calling it, man. I appreciate you seeing it back then. I appreciate you reaffirming it now.
Mhm.
Do you have time? Because we got some more to talk. Can we keep talking? Or
Yeah. Come on, let's go.
all right. So there's so much to unpack with that. That I gotta try and make sure that I do it in a way that respects your time, right?
Okay.
So, as we get into one thing I want to ask you, is what is your passion? What is the thing that you hate?
Mm. I hate to see people go without. That is something that I realized about myself from an early age. And I'm gonna tell you a story. One of my earliest memories is going to Chicago, right? So my family is from the South and the West Side.
Yeah.
And my father and my mother would take us to the city on the weekends,
Hmm.
South and West Side of Chicago, for those who aren't in Illinois, right? But South and West Side of Chicago. And so my mother, who's all of her family lived in Chicago, and all of my dad's family lived in Chicago. And so we would go out there on the weekends, and I would come essentially from Elgin or from Schaumburg, uh,
Burbs.
the burbs, and go into the city. And I would see, as soon as we get off the ramp, there are people there with signs saying, help me. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, I don't have any food. I don't have this. And one of my earliest memories is that happening to me. And I said to my dad, I said, what's wrong? Like, like why are they out here? Why are they, dressed like that? Why does he look like that? Why does he not have what we have?
Mhm.
And listen, I grew up on Section 8 housing on food stamps. Like, I thought that, that as a kid, I thought that we had it. You know what I
Sure.
mean? But in retrospect, I'm like, we was broke, we were poor, but it was still more than what that person had, I
Mhm.
realized.
Mhm.
And so I said to them, I said to my dad, I said, what's going on? I said, can you give him some money? And my dad went in his wallet and he gave me the money.
Hmm.
And he rolled down the window and I gave it to the man.
Mhm.
Right. And so that's what I realized early about myself, was that was an eye opener. Like, we,
Yeah.
we we talked about, like, recognizing when something is wrong, right? Anybody's gonna recognize that it's wrong, but it hit me in a way that was
Different.
so eye opening.
Yeah.
It was like, hold on, it ain't just him. Like, there's something off here if this is being allowed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, it was recognizing that and then say, I want to do something about that.
Yes, sir.
And so, like, everything that I do is about helping people become their best selves, or helping people get what it is that they need. So it's like being a spokesperson for
Mhm.
those who don't have what maybe some other people have, right? And so that's what my work is about. At the sheriff's office, I'm helping detainees who may not have ever had a Reggie in their life, and somebody tell them that they're a genius or something, helping them get on their feet. Or if it's at city council, and now I'm
Yep.
talking about systems
Yep.
and making systems better so that it protects people and doesn't disparage and take things away from people.
Mhm.
Or if it's just me and my community work that I do outside of those roles, if it's the back to school bash, if it's a community health fair, if it's sponsoring, community dinners or whatever the case may be, like I do all of this stuff because I recognized at an early age what one of my things was, and that was to make sure that people didn't go without. So that's what I do to this day. But that's something that I realized at a very, very early age. And I did not recognize that that was one of my skills, my talents, and being able to help change and make things better at a young age. But in retrospect, I did.
Yeah.
So
And so that's why you even call what you're in politics, you call it community service. That's why you call it that.
I do.
Because that's
Yeah.
how you look at it. You look at it like, hey, look, this is not about clout. This is about
Right.
commonwealth.
Right.
This is about making sure that things are distributed evenly and that there's no lopsided. There shouldn't be in this system that has so much affluence and opulence. There
Right.
shouldn't be somebody that does not have, right?
Yeah. Right.
Whether it's monetary, it's resources in general. You know, when we think of resources, we think of money, but resources can be time. Resources can be, you know, the ability to be seen and heard. This is why you and I connected when we started working with like the community dinners and the homeless. We're like, and I feel like what you saw in Chicago, once you got older and saw it operating in Elgin in the burbs, you was like, oh no, this definitely shouldn't be.
That's right.
It should not be in a place like Elgin. This should not be the case. We got to do something about it. Right?
We.
And so this begins to get into your talent, because your talent is, you mentioned this too, you mentioned so much that was forecasting where we are now, but your talent is not just, it's a tool. And so I like what you say, you like, sometimes it's not about obliterating the system. If your chair is broken, the solution is not to destroy the chair and get another one all the time. It's to see what part of it. It's always just a small part of the chair that's broken, and to get the right tool to fix it. And so your talent is your tool that you use to address what's broken. And so your talent of gathering people and networking and being able to lead them and galvanize them is what your tool is to apply it to, hey, I see systems where there's lack being created that shouldn't be there. And so that very much what I began to see, even as you were talking in the past couple of minutes, I began to see revenue streams. Like I saw like 4 revenue streams, right? And I'm gonna show it to you like this. There were 4 revenue streams. There was money flowing through this one, money flowing through this one, which was just called resources, and money flowing through this one, but this one, there wasn't any money flowing through. But you knew though, like there's supposed to be something flowing through this. And your talent, your genius is seeing the system and how it's not working, and having other people see, like, do you see that that's not how it's supposed to be? Right. And restoring the system so that what I heard was, when I saw this image, was a redistribution of wealth, a redistribution of resources.
Right.
So that's where I see you being at the center of redistribution, which of course is going to be met with some opposition, but the opposition is your Goliath.
That's right.
And you're going to know, like, hey, look, don't give me, somebody's going to say, hey, look, run your campaign this way, do it this way. And you got to be like David. When David saw the giant, they gave him Saul's armor. And he was like, don't give me that. Don't give me that. That's not meant for me. Give me my slingshot that I've used to kill bears and lions. Give me my slingshot and 5 smooth stones. That's all I need.
Listen, I remember running the campaign, and people would say, Corey, and homelessness was a pillar.
Yep.
And people would say, Corey, why are you talking about that? Like, nobody really cares about that. That was my slingshot. You know what I'm saying? I talked about other stuff too. But that was going to be one of my slingshots, because that's where a lot of my skill and my understanding is, and I needed that to be related to people. I need them to understand like who I was, and not somebody who I was trying to be, because I could have put on and had a different kind of platform, but my platform was about the people. It wasn't about, you know, things, fluffy things, nice things, everything is okay things. It was very relatable, I think. And that's why it resonated with people. and still it resonates with people today. Man, you just said so much in like what you notice, right? When I think about like recognizing those what's wrong in those systems and then like galvanizing folks, like a part of that genius is not only just recognizing that, hey, this system is broke, but like the way that you go about
Right.
fixing the system, like similar to what you did with that chair. For example, we have issues surrounding social justice in this world,
Hmm.
right? In this country for certain. And there are some people who protest,
Hmm.
right? We have some people that protest and they raise really good, really good. They put the issues on blast,
Yeah.
which is super important, right? You have some people who are behind the scenes, who are worker bees, who like during the civil rights movement, they help provide shelter and food to the civil rights, to those who are out there in the streets and doing the protesting, right? And then you also have people who were in government administrations as employees of the
Hmm.
government, and they were working right behind the scenes to help correct some things too as well. And then you also had some leaders who were elected officials who were outspoken, who were talking about this stuff. So it was like all of us are cogs in this wheel, and
Yep.
everything that everyone does is important towards making that wheel roll,
Everybody has
right?
a lever to pull.
Everybody has a lever to pull. And that is how I think about what it is that I do. And that helps keep me humble, because at the end of the day, I'm only a cog, right? I may be a great cog, you know what I'm saying? I think I'm a wonderful cog to have, but nevertheless, I'm a cog. But I will never look down and disparage or negatively talk about everybody else and what they do and how they go about their role, because that's their genius.
Yeah.
That is how they're called to be. I can't worry about that. I just got to stay true to who I am, who God made me to be, the genius that He downloaded in me, and recognize that I'm a cog in a big wheel, and
Yes,
I
sir.
need to do my part in order to make sure that this thing goes forward.
Like you can't call somebody else and say, "Here, hold my lever." You should be holding the lever the same way I hold. Like your job
Yeah,
is to say, "No, your lever is this. I need you to go pull that," so that you're not holding down too many levers, right,
right.
on your own. Like, no, come in. That's your lever. Go pull that. You pull that one, and together, when we do it in the right timing, we're going to unleash some things. We're going to galvanize, not galvanize. We're going to revolutionize some things and make it better than what it was when we found it. And so that, at the end of the day, your purpose is simple. Your purpose is to identify your God-given talent as a tool and then use that tool to address your God-given passion, which is addressing the brokenness that's in a system in the world, so that then you can unleash your genius and help other people do the same. And if I could just add one more thing to it before I kind of close us out,
Yeah.
if people, I'll address the people the way you address the people. If you're listening to this conversation and you're like, I don't think I have a talent. Everyone has a talent, but it's generational. And
Mm.
so if you're trying to figure, I think you even said this very early on, if you're trying to figure out what it is that your talent is, look to the family that came before you. Look to see what your parents and your grandparents were doing that maybe they had to push to the side because they had to care for their children. And that thing that maybe, because you talked about the person who maybe they tapped into this talent when they were younger and they just
Right.
abandoned it and left it aside because life got in the way.
Right.
But you can always come back to it. But even if that person never gets a chance to come back to it, this is how powerful God's blessing and talent is. He'll pass it to the next generation. We can look at David. David, we talked about David, what he did with Goliath, he became a king. And when he got to a place where he wanted to create a temple for the Lord to dwell in, what did God tell him? He's like, nope, you can't build it for me. Your son is going to build it. And so he passed on that role to his son. And so when that talent doesn't get fully manifested in the previous generation, it'll pass on to the next generation so that they can do something about it. We recognize how this operates in athletes, we recognize how this operates in entertainers, but we fail to see it in ourselves.
Yeah.
Our talent comes from our the lineage that we come from.
Yeah.
And so with the right position, with the right timing, with the right season, that talent can manifest and do a thing that it couldn't do in the previous generation. And so, I very much believe that that's what's been happening in you, that that you're not just creating a lane, but you're extending a lane that was created even in your father's time and your grandfather's time, and you're creating that lane both for yourself and for your children, so that it begins to be a place for them to thrive. And even some people who aren't going to be your biological children, but people who you take on and people who you groom to do the things that you have done, but do it in a way that's unique to their gift sets and their passion and their skill.
Yeah.
So, I want to give you the last word, but I just want to, just before I forget, I want to thank you again for coming out. This has been amazing. We could probably do a part 2, 3, and 4 to this, but I know you got to get out of your office and I got to tend to my family. So I'm gonna let you have the last word.
Yeah, you know what? I first just want to say just thank you for inviting me and being a guest. And I feel honored and I feel privileged to be here with you. And I love our conversation, and I always love our conversations. And it's like food for the soul, for my soul. So I really appreciate this time. And just to a final point about what you were talking about when you say generational geniuses, blessings, and things of that nature, right? We know there are generational curses too, right? That have to be broken. So you want to break those generational curses that did not allow those who came before you to realize those geniuses that you have, right? So you have to learn from those who were before you and not make the same mistakes, right? Or similar mistakes, or the kind of mistakes that can stop you from just realizing your genius. And that's really, really important for you to think of. And that might be alcoholism, that might be drugs, that might be, whatever is out there that will stop you from impeding on your progress of realizing yourself. But the whole generational thing of those geniuses being passed down is absolutely true. And let me tell you, the lane that I'm running in, I really believe was the lane of my father. And this is what happened. My father was murdered. My biological father was murdered when I was not even 2 years old. Okay. Before he passed away, my father was down on bad times. He was running the streets, trying to make ends meet for my mother and my older 2 brothers and I. And he got caught up in that, okay? And he ended up murdered as a result of that. But before he was killed, my father had enrolled in college. And I'm not going to tell you what he was studying, but he had enrolled in college. But of course, he wasn't able to see that through.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, years later, my mother remarried my stepfather who raised me, and that was my dad, and I was his son, and that's how we treated each other, and there was no anything involved. He passed away my freshman year in high school, right? My older brother's out of the house. I'm essentially the man of the house with my younger siblings and my mom. I was struggling as a high school student, okay? I was into a little bit of everything. And long story short, on this end, I got my stuff together and I went to college down at Grambling State University in Louisiana. And I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I applied to 2 colleges, 2 universities. One didn't get back to me soon enough. Grambling got back to me right away, but they didn't have an actual physical therapy program on campus. I would have had to travel somewhere else, which I didn't know until I got there, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I said, you know what? That's okay. I'm not going to transfer schools. I'm 1,000 miles away from home. I'm going to make good on this goal of completing colleges with another major. And I chose business management, right? Okay. I explained to my mother, of course, what happened. and that I was doing business man, that I'm going to do business management instead. And my mother got quiet on the phone.
Uh-huh.
She said, "You doing what?" I said, "I'm gonna do business management. The physical therapy, it would have been great, but actually, when I think about it, like, business management, like that's the lane that I want to be. I want to be a suit and tie kind of guy, right?" And my mother was like, "Wow." She was like, "Did you know that your father was in college, before he passed?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I knew that. I knew that." She was like, "No, but did you know that he was studying business management?" No, I didn't know that. Right. So immediately, instantly, I had received confirmation
Yes.
that I was in a lane that was going to help me unlock, now looking back, my genius.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And as my mother, when that happened, my mother would talk to me through school. She would tell me more and more about my father and the way how my brothers looked like him, right? But I behaved like him. You know what I'm saying? I moved how he moved, right? And so it was like he was manifesting himself in me, and that was that generational thing. So now I like to think that I am I am in the lane of my genius because of my father.
Yep.
And that probably came from his parents, who I never got a chance to know. And it was passed down through the bloodline. And so I'm just a culmination of all of these geniuses that came before me. And it gives me comfort in knowing that I'm passing that along to my children. My oldest daughter is now interning at a state representative's office in the summertime for the second year in a row. These are things that are now manifesting themselves through the geniuses that I realize. My younger kids are super outgoing. My middle child, Corinne, super empathetic and just like can feel everything. It's very intuitive. And then my other baby, I think one of her geniuses is comedy. She's really, really smart, and she recognizes the jokes, even though she can barely, formulate full sentences. Like, it's just a beautiful thing to watch how the blessings are passed down from generation to generation, and how, like, when you're walking in your blessing, not even just as a single person, an individual, but as a family unit with my wife, to my three daughters, and how we're walking in our blessing. And because we're walking in our blessings, the blessings continue to multiply, and now we can share that with the world, and they are going to be able to share that with those who are going to come after us. So it's all beautiful. So I just wanted to give you that point, because I think it's a great point to actually end on, is how these geniuses continue to manifest themselves generationally.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna tell you this last thing, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going a little bit over. You got to get
Hey, as
your
long as you got
get your
time and you
mom.
good, I'm good.
Okay. And then another thing too, I got an uncle, and my uncle said to me one day that that he was the guinea pig. I was the guinea pig. And what do you mean by that? Uncle Fred. What do you mean? What do you mean by that, Uncle Fred? He said, "Well, I sacrificed some things so that you can have some opportunities to do something," right? My Uncle Fred is super personable, super smart, didn't go far in school at all, uh, didn't even graduate high school, but he was a hard worker. He built a life for himself and his family. He was always clean, nice suits, nice cars. He never was in the streets. He was just a hard-working guy. He had all the qualities of a Fortune 500 CEO. He just didn't have the opportunities.
Yeah.
He didn't have someone growing up in the hood that told him that he was a genius.
Right.
But he recognized that when he had his nephews, his nieces, his own kids, that he needed to do some things so that we would have the opportunity to realize those geniuses and those dreams that he had for himself, but he knew in his mind that he could never realize, but he was going to make sure that we did. And it's through his sacrifice and sacrifice of my mom and my aunts and my uncles that all of us, the majority of us, a good portion of us, are first generation college students, doctors, lawyers. We're just manifesting what already was generationally. We aren't any different. We're not any special. We don't have any more favor. It was simply because generationally it was ripe for us. And so now we have inherited a responsibility to where now one of my cousins' oldest daughter is going to school now. Now she's going to be a doctor. And it's just a beautiful thing to sit back and think about how you fit in this cog of life.
I like that you use that word ripe, because that's exactly what it is, right? These seeds come in these, they come in these seasons. And sometimes a seed doesn't get a chance to sprout because there wasn't enough water or the ground was too shallow. And that's the previous generation. But then that seed, there's multiple seeds, and it happens in such a way that it's able to be sustained by the next generation. I was watching this movie. I encourage you to watch this movie if you haven't watched it already with your family, called Rise. It's the story of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
And when I finished watching it, I had been talking to my son about this, but when I finished watching it, I was like, this is the cost of fatherhood. And I won't say anything else about it.
Okay.
But when you see it, you'll see what you just mentioned, the cost of fatherhood. There's some things that the father is not going to be able to do because he only has a certain limit. He doesn't know what that limit is, but he can only get but so far. But then his goal is to open the door for his sons or his children to go beyond what he could do. And so I recognize that in my life for my children, and you have it in your life. Your uncle, you just described your uncle as having it. Your father had it, right? And it's just that cost comes at different levels in different ways. So thank you for sharing that story, because it perfectly exemplifies what it is we've been talking about over this past hour. And so, Corey, I want to thank you again for coming on. I'm going to switch it. Most of the time, I thank people for coming on as a guest and me being the host, but I'm going to say, hey, look, this has been the guest, Reggie Key of Common Genius, with the host, Minister Corey Dixon.
Oh, man, thank you, man. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I appreciate you, brother. Love you, brother. And, man, keep on keeping that light high and doing what you do, no matter where you go. Man, so it's been great. It's been wonderful. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed it and has taken something from this. And just know, last words, you're a genius too.
Yep. And it's my uncommon cue. I'll say it's our uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Oh, there you go. You got I thought I was the one hosting, man. Go on somewhere.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.